Absolutely, and I think it's very important to be clear that our research on this topic is not making any normative claims about whether outrage is, on the whole, a good thing or a bad thing, whether that be online or offline. Like, outrage has positive consequences and it has negative consequences, and whether it's inherently good or bad is not a question that I think science can necessarily answer. There's a lot of really great philosophical work on this topic. And philosophers have a lot of really important contributions to make to these conversations. The way I've been thinking about outrage is it is an emotion that evolved to serve a very specific function or set of functions. It's a way for us to signal what types of behaviors are socially unacceptable. It's a way to motivate the costly punishment of wrongdoing, and in so doing, provide really strong incentives to cooperate. And of course, that's essential to the survival and evolution of our species, that groups of humans can get together and cooperate for the good of everyone. And outrage, I think, has played a really important role throughout our evolution in disincentivizing bad behavior. There's another function which researchers have highlighted more recently, folks like Pat Barkley, Dave Rand, Jill Jordan, showing that not only does outrage motivate the shaming and punishment of wrongdoers, it also sends a signal to others about what kind of person you are. It sends a signal that you're outraged about something because you're not the kind of person who would do that thing. So it serves an important reputational function as well. So broadly, we can think of outrage having both social benefits in disincentivizing bad behavior and also personal benefits in sort of spreading the word to your social network, how good of a person you are, how cooperative, you should choose me as a social partner, and so on. One open question that we've been interested in my lab is the extent to which these new technologies like social media might kind of change the balance between these social benefits and the personal benefits. So because on social media, if you express outrage about something, that gets broadcasted to your entire network of connections, that's going to potentially amplify the personal benefits of outrage beyond what we might experience typically offline. So, you hear a colleague make a sexist comment and you call them out on it and you get credit for that from, the 3 or 4 people who might also be watching. But if you tweet about it, depending on how many followers you have, that might be 1,000 or 10,000 or a million, millions of people who learn that you feel that way about that issue. So I think what we're seeing with social media is like a really, really dramatic change in the scale of how individual expressions can reach people, broader social networks of people. In terms of the social benefits of outrage, that is a really, really tricky question in terms of what social media is doing to those benefits. On the one hand, social media gives voice to people who might not have had power to express outrage about topics, issues before social media. So especially by enabling people to connect with other like-minded individuals and band together. Movements like Black Lives Matter or Me Too, which are really important movements, maybe wouldn't have gotten the traction that they have gotten without social media. So in terms of amplifying the voices of people less powerful, that could have very positive social consequences. One hypothesis, and this is something that we don't have a lot of data for yet, is if social media, through the way that it's designed, is just sort of dialing up the volume on outrage in general. And this is something we've seen a little bit in data. If you ask people to report on how outraged they feel about witnessing immoral events, both offline and online, they report feeling more outraged about things they witness or learn about online. This is probably because the type of information that they're seeing online is very different from what you would encounter normally in your sort of offline daily life. If social media is just sort of indiscriminately dialing up the volume on outrage, then this could create a signal to noise problem where if everything is worthy of outrage, then effectively nothing is. And there's a worry, and this is a worry, we don't have solid data on this yet, that if everyone's shouting about stuff online, that it might make it harder for people to distinguish between the truly heinous and the merely disagreeable. And so the question is, well, what's getting lost in that noise? So these are just questions that have come to mind that are sort of based on my training in neuroscience and moral psychology and my colleagues and collaborators in my lab. And we're now really actively trying to develop tools that will allow us to ask these questions. So tools that will allow us to measure outrage expressions at scale on social media so that we can test these hypotheses about how it spreads and what kinds of topics are triggering it, and can we see evidence for this signal to noise issue? Maybe it's not an issue. Maybe people do express more outrage about topics that others would independently rate as more morally severe. But without the tools, we can't ask or answer the questions.